Welcome to today's deep dive. We have a really fascinating stack of data predictive models and tactical analyses to get through today.
Yeah, we absolutely do. There's a lot to cover.
Right. And if you've been following along with AFT Dice Season 12, you know exactly where we are in the calendar. We are looking right at the Saturday 21 March 2026 slate for round 6.
Round 6 already.
Exactly. And the numbers we have in front of us right now, well, they're pointing to a weekend that could fundamentally reshape the rest of the season.
Without a doubt.
So our mission today is to unpack all these underlying mechanics, examine the predictive models, and figure out exactly what you need to be watching out for when those dice actually start rolling.
It really is a critical juncture in the season. Looking at the projections we've compiled, round 6 is being heavily defined by, I guess, one specific concept, which is separation.
Separation.
Yeah, the models are essentially forecasting a massive separation weekend.
Yeah.
So for you watching at home, there are basically two distinct narratives you need to track. On one hand, you have the top 4 teams looking to cement a tier of absolute dominance and just completely pull away from the pack.
Leave everyone else in the dust.
Exactly. And on the other hand, we have this suffocating, just chaotic logjam of teams currently sitting between 5th and 13th place on the ladder.
That's a massive bottleneck.
It is a bottleneck of epic proportions.
Mm-hmm.
And the statistical friction in that middle section is palpable.
Okay, let's unpack this, starting with those elites at the very top.
Mm-hmm.
Looking at the current top 4, it is a formidable list. We've got North Melbourne sitting in first place, Adelaide right behind them in second,
Right.
the West Coast Eagles holding strong in third, and Hawthorn rounding out that elite tier in fourth.
It's a heavy-hitting group.
It really is. So from a macro strategy perspective, what are the actual stakes for this specific group this weekend?
Well, the stakes center entirely around the mathematics of a 2-game gap.
A 2-game gap.
Right. According to the predictive models, it is highly probable that all 4 of these elite teams will win their matchups this weekend.
All 4 of them.
All 4. And if North Melbourne, Adelaide, West Coast, and Hawthorn all secure victories, it creates a formidable 2-game buffer between this top tier and the rest of the field.
Wow.
And in the AFT Dice environment, a 2-game cushion completely alters how you manage the rest of your season.
Because it gives you breathing room, right?
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
It means a manager can afford to experiment with very tactical setups, or, they can just absorb a weekend where the dice simply run cold without instantly plummeting down the ranks.
You're not just constantly looking over your shoulder.
Precisely. You transition from playing a reactive survival-based strategy to a proactive dictating strategy.
Right, you're dictating the pace.
Yeah.
So let's look at how they might dictate that strategy specifically with the North Melbourne versus Carlton matchup.
Yeah, this one is interesting.
Because North Melbourne is in first and Carlton is just languishing down in 15th.
Yeah, it's a mismatch.
A huge mismatch. The projection here isn't just a win, it's a total blowout. The models are calling for North Melbourne by 31 points.
That's a massive margin in this system.
It is, and in a simulated environment, a manager doesn't just accidentally win by 31. So what is the tactical motivation for pushing the throttle that hard against a bottom-tier team?
That is the core question, and it comes down to a percentage play.
The percentage play.
Right. North Melbourne isn't just looking to put 4 premiership points on the board. They are actively playing the mathematical long game. The data suggests North Melbourne will be structuring their gameplay to push their overall percentage back up toward the 130% mark.
130%, which is incredibly high.
It's huge. And in this league, actively targeting a 130% benchmark requires a very specific risk profile.
Right, because you can't just play it safe and get to 130.
Exactly. You aren't shifting into a conservative possession retention strategy in the fourth quarter just to protect a lead. You are utilizing high-risk, high-reward offensive modifiers right up to the final siren.
So they are essentially trying to build a mathematical fortress.
That's a great way to put it.
Because maintaining a percentage that high means even if another team eventually catches them on total wins, North Melbourne holds the tiebreaker comfortably.
Yeah, they hold all the cards.
They're insulating themselves against future variance.
Precisely. It's the difference between merely surviving at the top and truly reigning over it. By keeping the pressure on and aiming for a 31-point margin against the struggling Carlton side, they force other top-tier teams to also play aggressively to keep pace.
They're setting the standard.
Yeah, it sets the baseline for what it takes to be the leader in Season 12.
And North Melbourne isn't the only team in that bracket expected to execute a really clinical game plan.
No, not at all.
Adelaide in second place is predicted to beat 16th place Fremantle by 14 points. Then you have Hawthorne sitting in 4th, fully expected to handle 17th place St. Kilda with a comfortable 19-point margin.
Yeah, the models are very confident there.
When you look at those spreads, it just paints a picture of a relentless march at the top. The models clearly don't foresee any major upsets here.
No, the models expect a high degree of professionalism from these squads. Look, in a dice simulation, lower-ranked teams often rely on high-variance strategies.
Right, rolling the dice, literally.
Literally rolling the dice on risky plays, hoping for a lucky string of results to cause an upset.
Yeah.
But elite teams counter this by playing low-variance, highly consistent structures.
They take the luck out of the equation.
Exactly. They neutralize the chaos, they execute their baseline game plan, and just let their superior base stats accumulate the points over 4 quarters. It's clinical dispatching.
Yeah.
But while the top of the table might be a story of expected dominance, the middle of the table is a completely different landscape right now.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because we have to talk about this mid-table bottleneck, the logjam.
It's a mess in the middle.
It really is.
Yeah.
You have teams from 5th all the way down to 13th who are just stepping on each other's toes, fighting for every single tactical advantage. And to break this logjam, the schedule has delivered some massive feature matches.
Oh, yeah, some absolute blockbusters.
Let's start with the designated match of the round. We are talking about Port Adelaide, currently in 7th, taking on the GWS Giants, who are sitting in 5th. And this is at the Adelaide Oval.
Crucial detail there.
Right. What is driving the anticipation for this specific clash?
Well, both of these teams are coming into round 6 with significant tailwinds. The data shows that both Port Adelaide and the GWS Giants surged up the power rankings last week.
They both had great weeks.
Yeah, they found something in their tactical setups that just clicked. So you have two highly confident managers colliding head-on. But the variable that throws the predictive models into a complete spin is the venue.
The Adelaide Oval.
Right, rolling against Port at the Adelaide Oval introduces a notoriously difficult set of modifiers. It's an absolute fortress for them.
So, given that venue advantage for Port, how is the model actually projecting the Giants to handle it?
It expects a phenomenal high-scoring shootout.
A shootout.
Yeah, when two teams with surging offensive confidence meet, and neither is willing to adopt a defensive absorbing posture, you get fireworks. The Giants have the visible momentum, but Port has that home field modifier.
Right. They've got the crowd, the familiarity, the stats boost.
Exactly. The resulting clash is expected to be suffocatingly close. The prediction actually has the GWS Giants edging it out, but only by 4 points.
4 points. I mean, in the context of AFT Dice mechanics, a 4-point margin is essentially a single contested roll going slightly awry.
Just one bad roll.
Or one crucial decision to push forward rather than switch play in the final moments. It's razor thin.
It is incredibly thin. It indicates that the models see these two teams as almost perfectly matched when you factor in the venue adjustments. It will likely come down to who manages their late-game fatigue modifiers better, or who capitalizes on just a fleeting moment of structural weakness.
That is going to be a fascinating tactical battle. Let's head over to the MCG for another major clash in the feature slot.
Yeah, this is a big one.
We have Melbourne currently sitting in 11th place, taking on the West Coast Eagles, who, as we mentioned earlier, are way up in 3rd. I want to highlight a wild statistical contrast for Melbourne because watching their games this season has been pure whiplash.
Whiplash is the right word.
They are scoring at a phenomenal rate, sitting at 524 points for the season. Their forward entries are lethal, but they simply cannot stop the leak on defense.
No, you can't.
They are hemorrhaging points at the other end.
Yeah.
So how does a team with an offense that potent find themselves stuck down in 11th?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, you start to see the fundamental flaw in their build. In a simulation league, you can stack all your chips on explosive offensive modifiers. But if your defensive structure has low contested roll baselines, you are perpetually vulnerable.
Right, you're just hoping to outgun them.
You are relying entirely on outscoring your opponent in a shootout every single week. And vulnerability is the absolute last trait you want to carry into a matchup against the West Coast Eagles.
Right, because the Eagles operate on a completely different frequency. Even though West Coast had a minor slip in the power rankings recently, the tactical consensus is that they remain a clinical machine.
That phrase perfectly encapsulates their playstyle, a clinical machine. Like, West Coast doesn't panic when an opponent kicks 2 quick goals.
They don't just abandon their strategy.
Exactly. They don't get drawn into chaotic, high-variance shootouts. They stick to a rigorous, methodical game plan that patiently dissects structural flaws. And the models make a very clear conditional statement for this game. If Melbourne cannot fundamentally tighten their defensive setup at the MCG, the Eagles will absolutely dismantle them.
And the numbers back that up starkly. The prediction has the West Coast Eagles winning by 22 points.
Yeah, it's a big margin.
That is a significant margin to project against a team that has scored 524 points. It implies that the Eagles' defense will successfully blunt Melbourne's attack, while West Coast forwards will exploit those defensive leaks ruthlessly.
Yeah. Exactly. It's a scenario where an unbalanced team meets a highly balanced elite team. Melbourne's manager has likely spent the whole week agonizing over whether to overhaul that defensive strategy, which risks unfamiliarity with the new system, or just trying to outscore the Eagles in a pure firefight.
Which seems like a terrible idea.
Yeah, the latter seems like a perilous gamble against a top 3 side.
A perilous gamble indeed. And speaking of gambles and volatility, we have to look at the clash happening at Metricon Stadium. The Gold Coast Suns, currently in 12th, are hosting Collingwood, who are sitting in 6th. We're looking at two teams moving in diametrically opposite directions here.
The contrast in trajectories here is just stark. Collingwood is currently the league's biggest mover. They jumped a massive 6 spots in the rank in a single week.
6 spots.
Yeah. Meanwhile, the Gold Coast Suns are trapped in this agonizing slump, dropping 3 of their last 4 games.
So how does momentum actually manifest in a dice-driven simulation? Obviously, the dice don't have a memory, right? But the managers rolling them certainly do.
That is a brilliant distinction. You are exactly right. The probabilities of a 6-sided die remain static. But momentum in this league dictates the human choices made before the dice are ever even rolled.
The mindset behind the strategy.
Right. When a manager jumps 6 spots in the rankings, they operate with a surplus of confidence. They might trust their system enough to make decisive, aggressive calls. Conversely, losing 3 of your last 4 creates a heavy second-guessing atmosphere.
You start doubting your own modifiers.
Exactly. A manager in a slump might start tinkering with their baseline settings, overcompensating, or just taking desperate risks that mathematically don't pan out.
So the psychological weight directly influences the tactical inputs. And the models seem to think Collingwood's current formula is too strong for a struggling Gold Coast side, even with the away trip to Metricon Stadium.
Yeah, the models are back in the pies heavily here. They project a comfortable 15-point victory for Collingwood.
Even away from home.
Even away. It reflects the belief that Collingwood's current systemic setup is robust enough to overcome the standard away game modifiers, while Gold Coast just hasn't shown the tactical cohesion necessary to defend their home turf.
It paints a vivid picture of how quickly fortunes shift in that mid-table chaos. I mean, a manager finds the right synergy and suddenly they vault 6 spots. A few bad decisions or unlucky rolls, and they are sliding right toward the danger zone.
It's a tightrope.
And looking at the rest of this middle scrape, the margins predicted in some of these other games are remarkably tight.
They really highlight the sheer parity of the competition between 5th and 14th place. The underlying stats for these teams are so closely clustered that the predictive models actually struggle to separate them.
Just look at the projections for the rest of the pack. Brisbane, sitting in 10th, is predicted to beat Essendon, who are in 8th, by just 8 points.
An 80-point margin.
That is a single-digit margin in a game that could completely invert their positions on the ladder. And then you have Geelong in 13th, expected to sprint past Sydney in 14th by a mere 2 points.
Yeah.
2 points. When a model predicts a 2-point margin, what is it actually telling us?
It is essentially telling us the matchup is a statistical coin flip.
A total toss-up.
Yeah. A 2-point margin in this system is the equivalent of the model just throwing its hands up. It means the baseline metrics of both teams are virtually identical, and the outcome will likely pivot on a single isolated variable.
Like what?
Perhaps one manager utilizes a specific situational modifier slightly better. Or one team gets a lucky bounce on a 50-50 contested mark late in the 4th quarter. For anyone watching, these are the games where deep tactical nuances really shine. You aren't watching a blowout. You're watching a grueling war of attrition where every single tactical lever pulled by the manager matters.
But the reality is not everyone is fighting a mid-table war of attrition. We have to shift our focus now to the absolute bottom of the ladder, to a situation the analysts are ominously dubbing the spoon watch.
Yes, the grim battle to avoid finishing dead last.
Yeah.
It is always a heavy narrative. But the contextual stakes here for the specific teams involved are truly fascinating.
We are looking at what is essentially a desperation bowl. You have the Western Bulldogs sitting at the absolute bottom in 18th place, going up against Richmond, who are currently in 9th. Now, the models predict Richmond will win this game handily with a 27-point margin.
Which makes sense on paper.
Right, and you can see the motivation for Richmond. They are sitting just outside the elite tier, desperate for a percentage boost to vault back into the top 8. But the situation for the Bulldogs, well, it's dire.
What's fascinating here is the sheer psychological weight hanging over the Bulldogs camp. For Richmond, it's about ambition and structure. But for the Western Bulldogs, the stakes are existential.
Existential.
Yes, the predictive models have run the simulations for the rest of the year, and the output is blunt. If the Bulldogs do not find a way to win this game against Richmond, their entire season could be effectively over by round 10.
That is a staggering thought. Having your season functionally declared mathematically dead by round 10.
It's brutal.
We are only analyzing the round 6 slate right now. To have a terminal timeline hanging over your head so early in the year must be suffocating for a manager just trying to formulate a weekly game plan.
It creates a highly volatile dynamic.
Yeah.
Richmond will need to be careful.
Why is that?
Because when a manager's backed into a corner with the mathematical reality of their season slipping away, standard operating procedures just go out the window, they might abandon their foundational playbook entirely and come out swinging with absolute chaotic energy.
Right, they have nothing to lose.
Exactly. They start utilizing obscure, high-variant strategies they would never normally touch. Richmond's predicted 27-point margin assumes a standard game of AFT Dice. But desperation rarely plays standard.
So what does this all mean? When we look at the entirety of the round 6 slate from the top of the table to the bottom, what is the ultimate takeaway for you as you prepare for the weekend?
That's the big question.
I think it boils down to how different teams manage the margins based on their specific existential realities. You have the absolute elites like North Melbourne who are manipulating the dice mechanics not just to win, but to engineer 31-point margins to build a 130% mathematical fortress at the top of the ladder.
That is the perfect summary. And directly below that elite tier, you have the chaotic 5th to 13th logjam, where the margins aren't about building fortresses, they're about sheer survival.
Right, just staying alive.
It's managers fighting tooth and nail in 4-point shootouts at the Adelaide Oval, or trying to ride the psychological wave of a sudden hot streak, or desperately trying to patch structural flaws before a clinical machine like West Coast totally dismantles them.
It is a weekend defined by stark tactical contrasts. We have clinical precision operating at the top and volatile desperation scrambling at the bottom.
This raises an important question, though, and it's a concept I really want you to mull over as you watch the results roll in this weekend. It builds perfectly on the dire situation we just discussed with the Western Bulldogs.
I love leaving off with a lingering thought. Let's hear it.
When the pure mathematics and the predictive models of a simulation league declare that a team's season is effectively over by round 10, how does that immense psychological pressure actually affect the human rolling the dice?
Oh, that's deep.
Does being backed into an existential corner where every loss accelerates your mathematical demise cause a manager to innovate and completely rewrite their strategic playbook to survive? Or does the heavy, suffocating weight of inevitability crush their baseline performance entirely, making those 27-point predicted losses a self-fulfilling prophecy?
Wow.
It's the human element behind the statistics, and it remains the most unpredictable variable in the game.
That is a phenomenal lens to view this weekend through. The tension between the cold mathematical models and the human willpower to defy them. We will definitely have to see if the Bulldogs can rewrite their script or if the clinical machines at the top will continue their relentless march. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the AFT Dice Season 12 data.
It's going to be a great round.
It really is. Keep a very close eye on the scoreboard this Saturday, the 21st of March, to see if these projections hold true or if the chaos of the logjam completely upends the models. We will be right here to analyze the fallout next time.